7 o'clock, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Jolene, would you do me a favor and go tell John and, there, oh, whoever. Patrick will do it. Patrick will do it. So, I'm gonna do a roll call. Danbury?
Here.
Schatzinger?
Here.
Oh, Page?
Yeah.
Gatsky?
Here.
Krieger?
Here.
Iverson?
Here.
Sorensen here. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Gary. Who's Jonathan? Okay, Jonathan seconded it. Public comment.
We're on a roll
There's
already.
2 chairs up here.
Right here. Right here and
I'm
here.
good. I'm good. John, you have to give me.
But why not join? Why not?
Okay.
We didn't approve the agenda.
Okay. I thought John,
I second it.
all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, Gary, our parliamentarian, for that catch. You caught that, we didn't vote. Oh, okay, we have no public comment. Now we'll move on to the secretary's report. You should have 2 copies of minutes in the November 9th and October 3rd. October 3rd because there were changes made to those meetings. One is Barry, who wanted a notation thanking Kim and Steve Davis for their service to the fire district. And there was a second change also, right, Doug?
Yes, I misspelled the interim fire chief's name several times.
Okay, all right. And then you'll see that those changes are also reflected, and we don't have to approve that, but we do have to approve the November 7th meeting minutes in which those changes are again reflected. So they're in 2 places. So is there a, yes, sir?
I have changes on both those minutes.
Oh, okay.
Again, under public comment,
Yeah,
it's Stephen Kim Davis, not Davies,
oh geez.
D-A-V-I-S.
Sorry, Barry, I'll fix that.
And so it would be the same thing on the November 7th, right?
D-A-V-E-S?
I-S?
D-A-V-I-S.
I-S.
I-S, sorry.
That's all I have.
Is there a motion to approve with the changes?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Tom seconded it. Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Treasurer's report. We just have a check register, Heather?
Yeah, it's been, I haven't gotten the right numbers from Civics yet.
Yeah, in the download of Civics and then the upload to QuickBooks, there was a discrepancy in the or they haven't, oh, you're waiting for,
I'm waiting for the September.
you're waiting for the payroll from September. Okay,
The final numbers for that.
okay. So we're waiting on that before we can begin running any sort of reports. Does anybody have any question on the check register, the applied payments? Do we have a balance on the checking account?
Go get one.
Would you get a balance on the checking account and the money market account, so we can do that? Is there anything else anybody is interested in for financials?
Don't we typically have kind of a year-to-date?
We can't do that yet until it's reconciled
That's
with
what you
the
were just saying.
September payroll.
Got it.
Yeah. And I think there was some We were off a little bit when we downloaded from Civics into QuickBooks too, so CLA is working to reconcile that.
There's one transaction, it was a transfer between accounts that I believe happened in one area in 1 year and in one the other. So I think once you get through your QuickBooks and to get all your payroll, then let's look at your accounts and let's just try to do your bank recs, because that's where it's gonna stand out, is where that piece is. So I think I sent over the 2 accounts that it was, though.
So we do have discrepancies, but we're working from an accounting level to reconcile them.
It was one account, I forget what it was. It was an actual physical bank transfer between 2 accounts.
Between the money market and
Yep,
the,
yep, and the timing of when it happened.
okay. So it's those little
Everything else, well,
things.
that was for 22,
Yeah,
that everything else worked.
but we have to have that,
In 23.
we also have to have all that going forward for 23. So our year-end balances have to work too. So Amber will make a note about that.
I think Kelly was working to fix that, so I'll double check.
Kelly's been great for, a great resource for Heather.
The checking is at $29,999.52. And the money market is at $232,914.46.
What was the first number again?
$29,999.52.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask for an approval for this because it's just a check register and we don't have a report to give you. Knowing that some things are off, I don't want the board to approve something that isn't correct. So we can move on to the special order of business for the audit. And Jim is here so that once Amber presents, if anybody has questions that Amber can't answer, or Kelly can't, or not Kelly, Katie can't answer, Jim is here to assist. Did you have something, Jolene?
No, Casey, did you say Casey?
Casey, yeah.
Casey.
Casey, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think you have the bound document, and then there's a stapled document within the bound document. So I'm gonna go through the bound document first, and I'm gonna kind of go through the numbers high level, then we'll get into the rest, but on page 1, that document. On page 1 of that is our independent auditor's report. So we've audited the accompanying financial statements of the Ripon Area Fire District, in Ripon, Wisconsin, a component unit of the city, as of and for the year ended December 31st, 2022. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the district as of December 31st, 2022. That's a clean, unmodified opinion, the best opinion we can provide from an audit standpoint. The next paragraph talks about the basis for the opinion. We do not look at every transaction of the district. As I'll get into later, we did do a significant amount of additional testing in 2022, but we do not still look at all transactions. We use a risk-based test approach and so forth. That's done through inquiry, that's done through materiality thresholds, and kind of, I'm going to say, our past experience doing the fire district's audit.
And materiality thresholds means?
Yeah.
Means?
There's different calculations that you can use within the standards. So it's a percentage of either assets, revenues, or expenditures that we use, and then it boils it down. So we have a planning materiality, which is the total materiality, which if there was a misstatement and it exceeded that, then we would have to give a I'm gonna call it in simple terms, not a clean opinion. And then there are different thresholds. We have performance materiality, and we have clearly trivial ISI, and that all depends on what we're required to disclose. So if we have a difference that's over clearly trivial, which is a pretty small dollar amount, we'd be required to disclose it to governance. If our ISI thresholds is what we use for testing, so any balances that are over ISI, we're technically required to test or have some sort of documentation on. And then the performance materiality is kind of that in-between flexibility that we have. But usually it's a percentage of those, and then we can, if we find that there's additional risks, we can lower that materiality, which we did in 2022. So. The final paragraphs here, responsibilities of management. Management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements. That is done through, evidence of that is done through signing of the management representation letter at the end of the audit, which I'll explain that in the other document. Our responsibilities as auditors is to issue an opinion within the standards, and that is on detailed out on page 2 of the opinion. The rest of the opinion I'm going to skip. That's just some additional nighttime reading for you. And I'll go into the numbers. So on page 5, the statement of net position. As of December 31st, 2022, the district had approximately $326,477 in operating cash available, and another $32,500 approximately in fundraising dollars that are restricted for certain purposes. The total net position as of December 31st, 2022 was about $2.7 million. 2.3 of that was the net investment in capital assets, so your equipment, your vehicles, and so forth. Buildings. 56,000 of your net position, or 57,000, was restricted for pension benefits. That is the district's proportionate share in the Wisconsin retirement system. So that's a non-cash item as an asset that's restricted. That comes from an actuarial study done at the state level that the district has no control over, other than making contributions to the Wisconsin retirement system.
And we're good there.
Yes.
We're actually in a really robust position.
Correct. That in 2022, the Wisconsin retirement system was about 106% funded. I believe it was 106. In 2023, it will be a liability, and I forget the exact percentage that it is. Usually it falls in like 97%, but the state manages that with the contribution levels. So a very good program. So that leaves restricted for future equipment purchases is the $32,000. That's the fundraising money. That's restricted from a cash perspective. And then the unrestricted net position is about $316,000. That is kind of, I'm going to call a little bit of your rainy day fund. There's some non-cash type items in that number, which I'll talk about here shortly, but that's really the net position that the district has available to them. That does not mean that it's cash. So I just want to make sure that that you understand that in an enterprise type situation, particularly, there's non-cash items in there that you can see that $316,000 doesn't correlate to the $326,000 up top.
You can consider it assets as part of that.
Yes, yep. And so because of those non-cash items, so we can go to page 6, and this statement here, this is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in that position, but really, let's focus on a couple items here. Your total operating revenues increased from $481,000 to $519,000. Most of that was about a $12,000 increase in the assessment to the municipalities, and then about $27,000 in public charges. Most of that in fire inspection and those types of items.
That looks like the state, part of that should be state, the 2% state dues.
The 2% state dues is the line right above it, the 26.
Yep, okay.
So, let me pull out one more. There is a full, that's only the expenditures. I can get a breakdown for you of what's exactly in that 67,000,
I know.
or
it's-
Heather might have it actually too.
We know it's in there.
But, so that's your increase in revenues year over year. Your total operating expenses increased 545,000 to about 750. Most of that in the personnel line.
That
And
line was over.
and that was, so the personnel line, for personal services, was 347,000, which includes benefits. But if you can see here, it was 311,000 compared to 193,000 in the prior year. So most of that increase is there. There's depreciation in that total, which is the non-cash item, so I'll talk about that on the cash flow and how we can take that number out to really look at how did the district perform during 2022. So if we go to the operating loss, there was an operating loss of about 232,000 compared to 64. Again, most of that is in that wages line, which is about $120,000 of that 234,000. Go to page 7. How does this correlate? So, because you're an enterprise fund, I like to look at cash flow, because how are you doing in terms of your cash? Because depreciation is not something you're paying out the door. It's something you need to account for, because you have to put some funds in reserve potentially to replace equipment and vehicles. But are you able to generate enough cash flow from your operations to pay for those capital needs, and if you have any debt? The district doesn't have any debt, so that makes things simple. So your total cash from operations was a deficit of $140,000 in 2022 compared to a surplus of $80,000 in 2021. Again, most of that falls within those personnel and wages line, which was a change of $120,000. Acquisition of capital assets, there was purchase of capital of about $86,000. There was the donation of about $126,000 in '22 that has not been spent and will be spent in '23. I don't think it was spent in '22.
I don't think we spent it in 20.
I think it was kind of set aside in 20.
I think
23.
it's still set, there's 57-ish thousand remaining in
Yeah, they used it to
the
build the
Orville,
garage.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they used some of it for the garage, but then there is about
There's some left.
57,000 left.
Okay. I couldn't remember the exact number of what it was, but so that money is earmarked within as well. So the total change in cash was a deficit of $83,000 at the end of 2022, compared to a surplus of $84,000 the following year. Cash flow, it's hard to look at a one-year period because you might have a timing of when, say, a donation, for example, in your case, comes in and when the full expenditure goes out. So for cash flow, it's important to look at a trend of 3 to 4 years of where's my cash flow at, and does it even out over a period of time? So, or is it as you expect? Maybe you're changing something within operations and you plan to kind of spend some cash down. But is it what you expect? And you can't look at that as a 1 year period of time, because that can be kind of misleading. So I like to compare 4 years or so if you're doing that internally, if you can track that. Any questions on those numbers?
Oh, wait, you just said that you like to track those 4 years. Are we doing that?
Probably not yet. So
Not yet.
that's something that, we can provide this, and then what I would say is you can track it on a monthly basis going forward, and especially once you get through the conversion here, go through that, track it monthly, and then verify. You're going to want to update it for the audit at the end of the year, but then you can kind of have an idea of, okay, what's my ins and outs, and keep it simple for you throughout the year. What's my ins, what's my outs, and then compare that then over a period of time too, because if you know that you're always going to have a peak in March, now you know that okay, I have to be careful if I'm gonna change something within the operations or if I'm gonna do a big capital purchase. Versus maybe I have more cash flow come October and then I'm able to make those changes. If that makes sense.
It does, and the software we're moving away from was an accrual-based software, so when Barb would send out an invoice, say for the municipalities, it would book as revenue right away. You would get a report showing it revenue when we'd never received it. So we believe the new accounting system is going to give us a better sense of where we are.
Yeah, and within QuickBooks, you have the option. So you can actually run accrual-based reports or cash basis reports. So as long as you're entering that information in with the correct dates on the front end, and I believe Kelly has talked about that with you guys, but then you're able to run those reports using those two differing options. So then depending what you're doing, if you're looking at a budget perspective, the budget, maybe you do want to look at the accrual versus the cash basis, but the cash, you want to look at it from a cash flow perspective. So because come year end, if you don't look at the accrual all the time and you have accrued payroll at the end of the year, it's going to mess with your budget to actual at that point in time. So it's kind of nice. And then you can run your trial balance based off of that. You can run your budget to actual reports based off of cash and accrual. So you have some flexibility in that, and it'll give you all the same information.
So it's not as though the accrual was a wrong way of doing it. It's just that it's important to realize that that's what it
There's
was
differences.
looking at, and there are
Correct.
differences.
And I'm not sure, I didn't realize it was accrual based. I didn't realize that's what we were looking at. And began to realize when we did the transition and we were looking at cash, that that's why some things were a little unusual. And that's why I didn't have you approve a report, I think in July or August, because I knew it was accrual based and I wasn't sure the numbers, I knew the numbers from an accrual standpoint were probably okay, but I knew from a cash basis they were not. And I think right now it's helpful, we can give you both reports. It's just that it's helpful to know cash on hand because I think that sort of got away from us in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think both of them. A lot of people do use the accrual basis. You need to have the accrual basis for the audit because you don't want a cash basis isn't necessarily GAAP. But if you, depending on what you're doing, you're going to use one versus the other. And I think that's helpful just to understand what those are. Most entities will go cash basis throughout the entire year, even if they're on an accrual system. They'll go cash basis throughout the entire year until the end of the year.
Yep.
And then they'll go accrual. So because month to month, it doesn't really matter if you're going to accrue that or not, just pay it in the month that you're going to pay it. And then come year end, you're going to just get those within December. If that makes sense. There is a broken down budget to actual on page 24. I'm not really going to go into that, but I want to make sure that you're aware of it, that there is a little bit more detail to that. And if you have questions on that, let me know. But I do have, and making a switch to QuickBooks, I do have the grouping reports that we use for the audit that I'd be able to provide. That gives you the exact accounts that are within each one of these classifications. So, otherwise, there's a bunch of notes in here, a lot on the pension, so that's something I would recommend reading at night when you don't want to fall asleep. Page 25 has the operating assessments and the fire dues assessments. So the total operating assessments was $425,000, broken down between the city of Ripon, town of Ripon, and I'm going to butcher that name.
Nepiuscum?
Nepiuscum. And then the fire dues breakdown for that $26,000. Then page 26. So here starts some new things. I think we kind of talked a little bit about this last year, but we went into a little bit more detail here. So as part of the audit, we review the district's internal controls. We do not issue an opinion on those internal controls, but we would be required to disclose any findings that we have or any non-compliance. So we did have some significant deficiencies here that we included. One for the preparation of the annual financial report, which means we prepared this document. Very common, I think we prepare probably 95% of our clients' financial statements. A lot of that has to do with the disclosures that are required for the audit. A lot of places could probably provide the Excel document with the numbers. It's all of the rest of this that goes with it. So that's really done as a convenience, but we are required to disclose that within here. The other one is a segregation of duties finding, and that really relates to access. So segregation of duties is, in the district's case during 2022, you had a bookkeeper. She had complete access to the financial system, but couldn't do really anything from a cash perspective. So, and there were some checks and balances in place from a high level perspective. But then there's also the side of the fire chief had access to initiate transactions, approve transactions, and with limited involvement in that, aside from the bookkeeper cutting a check. The fire chief also had access to bank accounts and could make transfers, etc. So that, when we dove into this, so I've been on the fire district for a number of years, but when it came to me as signer now, we took a little bit of a different approach, and we evaluated some controls in a different manner than what we had been doing in the past, and uncovered some of those weaknesses within the internal control structure. As a result, when we add a segregation of duties finding, we have to change our planning and our risk assessment. We then did some additional subsequent testing, but then we also did some additional focus testing around the segregation of duties, risk in particular. So around expenses, around cash and transfers and things of that nature. And Casey did a lot of that testing for us. And those were things where maybe there's some inconsistencies with approvals on the front end and on the back end, and limited documentation in terms of what was available. So that's what this finding relates to. And
What does that mean? What was available?
the documentation available, so maybe all the journal entries maybe didn't have everything, or maybe the approved invoice, or there wasn't a formal approved invoice from the fire chief. One of the additional tests that we did was the fire district has an account over at the hardware store. We actually went through and obtained that full listing of transactions. We went through and looked for all of the transactions for supporting documentation. We also kind of tried to see, okay, who's making these purchases? Were they approved? Who checked what came back from the purchase? Those types of tests. Some of that's hard to prove because you don't know, there wasn't really a good control in terms of, say I go to the hardware store and make that purchase and I bring it back. There really wasn't that control over somebody verifying what came back and did that match the receipt. So those are some of the instances that we encountered, and that really comes back to this finding. So how do we correct that? And that's some of what we talked about last year in the base, creating that base policies and procedures of here's the expectation, here's the foundation, what's the expectation for each individual person and what we're going to have, and really evaluating each area of the district, and starting with cash, starting with your accounts payable, going through your payroll. What are the internal controls within that process? So you have a policy, but the procedure is the internal control. So in the instance of the hardware store, in essence, that probably should have been somebody else making that transaction or coming back and a full detail being provided, which we struggled to get some of that documentation. And it wasn't just retained. So think about a credit card. It's really the same as a credit card. Of when you make a purchase on a credit card, you would expect that all of the documentation is going to be attached to a log or to a bill and provided to somebody to oversee and sign off on. And then if there's significant purchases and that significant dollar amount, you can determine, management can determine, say it's $100, say it's $500, whatever you want, okay, where did this piece of materials or equipment go? Is it actually here? May or may not be. Did somebody then verify that? So that's where, those are some of the examples of what we did. We did test payments to individuals, and we did a hardware one, and there was a couple other additional ones. I'm working on them right now. But we did that as a response to our increased risk. And so that's something that I would recommend that the fire district internally do of where do I feel like my risks are from an internal control standpoint? Where do I need to enhance them? And what am I going to do to implement that? And then really understand that a policy is just that, a policy. It's really the procedure that has the internal control within it, if that makes sense. Any questions on that piece?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So that's something that you could show us a little bit more specifically how we could test this on our own?
I think this reverts back to our need to revise our policies and procedures across the board, as well as our bylaws, because sometimes those two things are in conflict. I think you may have looked at them also, Doug, you're aware of it, and that we can make some of these policy changes within policies and procedures. And then if we need to have a statement, it can be in the bylaws. But we have good people who can review those for
Right.
us as we're moving forward with policies and procedures.
And one thing with policies and procedures, what I always caution people on with how fast technology is changing, it's important to not just create policies and procedures and put them off to the side, because that should be an evolving process. What I've started to recommend to my clients is make that a document that you can review during your budget time every year. And you might look at one policy and say, okay, yep, this is still fine. Cross over it, move forward. But then the next one might be a different story of, nope, I need to revisit this. Then you can put the revised date right on them, do it through your budget process or during that time. Maybe it's not in your budget document because that's really an internal management source, but you can use that as, this is the time that we're going to revisit this, and we're going to do this every year. And with technology, and going to a different software, there's different controls within QuickBooks versus Civic. There's different ways to run reports that governance will see, and those are all mitigating controls. So if you can't segregate the control at the base, where does governance come into play? And that's really where thinking about through that whole process, and that can change over time, because I have some clients where at their governance they might not have anybody who feels comfortable reviewing financial information, where that's just not for them. But then I have others who they have multiple people. So then how do you bring somebody in? And if you don't have somebody that feels comfortable with that, is that the time where you bring an outside accountant in to help you review month-end close and those types of items? But that can change over time as people change, as technology changes, and that's important to remember. So I would recommend that, again, those policies and procedures, and I would keep them by, you want to be as specific as possible, but broad in the same sense, because you don't want to get to Heather does this. You want that to be a position, because you don't want to be updating that if Heather goes away. And then you're creating more work for yourself. You really want then it to be a toolbox for somebody to come in and say, okay, here's my policies and procedure manual. I can jump into this position. And that's, I think, what's important is how does the next person be successful in that role, and how does governance feel good about where things left off and where they're gonna go.
So you had said that, was it a recommendation that if someone goes to, let's say, Ace, buys something, that someone else signs off or checks that it's back here? Do you work with organizations where there's someone signs something, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's kind of like a receiving label, like our packaging of this is what, this is what I received, verifying that, attaching that with the check and the invoice. And it really, you want that to be somebody outside of that process. So Jolene, say you have the ability to go and purchase from the hardware store, coming back, it shouldn't be, okay, now Jolene's back at the district, I'm gonna sign off that I did it. No, it should be maybe Heather, who doesn't have access to go and make purchases. If you can't do it that way, and it does have to be somebody who has the same access, that's okay, but then that's where then you probably want a little bit more detail coming to the board versus just a piece of paper.
A piece of that, Amber, is that we're still having problems with the hardware store because they allow anyone to charge, even though they've been given specific names. So they're allowing anybody to charge, even though they've been told only these people can charge.
Yep. At that point, I would cut it off. That's a risk. That's a huge risk. I would absolutely cut it off. And it's the same thing with when you're talking about credit cards, or you're talking about the new big thing is Amazon. We have clients all over the place that have Amazon accounts, and you wouldn't believe the number of personal transactions that end up on Amazon accounts. And it's not necessarily intentional. It's all of a sudden I'm logged in and I'm doing this, and all of a sudden the bill comes through, and now what do? And as nice as Amazon is for all of us and convenient, the documentation that comes from that isn't real great. And the support, when we go look at Amazon transactions and the support behind it, it's pretty brutal. It's not very detailed. It's just not robust. And so those types of areas, charge accounts at, we have ones at Menards with the rebates. Who's getting the rebate back? Is that coming back to the client? Is that going back to the person? The same thing on the credit cards is really making sure that that's who's getting those rebates. Are you verifying that you're getting those rebates on whether it's a yearly or a quarterly, annual basis, whichever they're paid out at? It's those types of things that as technology and the world changes, how is that built into your policies and procedures? And have you rethought back through all of this entire process? The number of clients that we have that are I still come and ask for policies and procedures, some of them 1991. I can tell you what's happening right now is not what happened in 1991. And they're like, well, this is it. And they're like, well, it hasn't been a priority. It needs to be a priority because it is opening yourselves up to risk. And if you think about it from this, I like to talk about it from, if I'm the one who's approving something and I sign my name on it and that was done in error, in fraud, I'm just as guilty as the person who did it. The same thing is from a governance perspective. If you're not really understanding what those transactions are and what's in there, and you're saying you're approving them, that's you signing off on them as well. So to feel comfortable with that, that's really where that internal control piece comes in. Is I want to feel good about my controls and the foundation, and then I'm going to be okay approving that at a high level. And then being able to have access to the information. If you're reviewing that check register and say you want to say, okay, can I see this transaction? Can I see the support for it? You want to feel comfort in that when you ask for that support, that you're getting all of the necessary documentation versus just one page of paper. And I'll give the example of, I serve as a treasurer on an athletic association, and I asked for support for what they did for a nacho bar. And it was numbers on the bottom of a piece of paper. When I saw it, I was not happy. This is not supporting documentation. And if you're going to have that, or you're going to have like a fundraiser or something, who else is involved in that? And especially, the with the fundraising money or with any donations, you do some events, right? Do you do breakfast? I think you do a breakfast event.
Do chicken barbecue.
The chicken barbecue.
But that's the association to our component.
Correct, and that's part of that. But anything that the district has that's attached is, okay, what's all happening throughout that event? What are the controls within that event? Because now, do I have multiple people collecting cash? Where's the startup cash? Who verified it on the back end? All of these things that you think, okay, I'm gonna have this event, okay, I have my chicken, I have the fixings to go with it. But did I slow down and think about all of these other items? And that's really what should be built into that policy and procedure manual, so that you're not recreating the wheel every time that particular situation occurs. If that makes sense?
When you say supporting documentation, if you ask, you should be able to get it. I like, here we have our memo description ability here, and it's not on here. Now, maybe that's okay, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but is that an example of an internal control that is helpful, or?
I wouldn't say it's an internal control, but I think it's helpful in your reviewing, because if I have a memo here, and I can see what's being entered, it's gonna help me process, okay, do I need to question this more? Versus right now, if I can steal this for a second, if I have this, looking at this, if I'm in your shoes, okay, I'm gonna look at this and I'm gonna say, okay, well, I don't really have any detail and I really don't know that I wanna review every single invoice, so I guess I'm gonna be okay with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I think it's not necessarily a control, it's helping you have more information to know maybe when you don't question something. And not saying that somebody couldn't enter that memo wrong, because they absolutely could. But there's also you're gonna build a comfort and a trust level with that. And if you start pulling, say monthly, say you're looking at 5 transactions here or there, anybody in that position is going to say, well, Jolene's going to pull 5 random transactions, I don't know which ones. Odds are I'm not going to try to put something by. You know what I mean? You're going to, that tone at the top comes down of somebody's looking over what I'm doing. And that's what you want to establish. Because whenever we have issues, it's really kind of that lax at the top over the mitigating controls when you don't have that perfect segregation of duties underneath. Or if you don't even realize that you don't have the segregation of duties, which sometimes that's the case too. Any other questions on that bound document? If not, the stapled document that should have been in there.
I don't have
It's probably sticky on the, I think it's sticky on the back.
Oh, okay.
There we go. So this is our governance communication. Repeats a lot of information, so I'm not gonna go run through all that, but that one, yep. So middle of the page under accounting policies, there were no new accounting policies adopted, and none changed. I will note that for 2022, we did have to evaluate GASB statement number 87, which was the leases. So any lease agreements or embedded leases. So that was a new standard, was a significant one and a significant change for GASB, but it was not, we did not note anything material to the district that would have to be recorded, but we did have to do a full search for those. That's right.
And thank you for doing that. My concern has always been my concern was a potential lack of understanding GASB and the accounting principles associated with it for a public entity.
Yeah, yep, and we verify, we run through, and both our audit teams, so our audit team does, both Casey and I, all we do is state and local government, so we're in the GASB world all the time. And our quality review team is dedicated to GASB, so they do a nice job in that. So that's where that would be caught. There is a new one for 2023 that is probably going to be more applicable to the district, and that is GASB Statement 96 as it relates to subscription-based softwares. So
Yes.
Oh,
you have QuickBooks and anything else that you're
Yes,
using from,
so,
from a daily operation standpoint, potentially could be applicable. So that one may have a bigger impact, or at least will probably require more testing than what 87 did. Accounting estimates, so we have the depreciable life of your capital assets, the net pension asset and liability, and the deferred inflows and outflows that goes with that. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We have none here. I think just obviously we're late here, and a lot of that was the additional testing, or all of that was the additional testing that we did throughout the year. And so normally it would not be this late here. So the corrected misstatements, we do as a non-audit service, we do the GASB 68 entries. That relates to the WRS pension. That's common for, I think, just about all of our clients, aside from some higher level county clients that do their own. No disagreements with management, and the rest of this is informational. But then the management representation letter is the back of that document, and that's management taking responsibility for the financial statements. Any questions? I think with all the transition, I mean, I want to make sure Heather did a lot of work for us, so we really appreciate it, gathering all that. We know that it was a lot of time and probably digging into what you didn't know what you didn't know. So thank you. And Ellen, we've had a number of conversations throughout, and so yeah, we really appreciate that. But
it was a lot of work. So thank you. Typically, I think it's an action item that we accept the audit. Are you ready to do that tonight, or do you want to postpone it for a month, or what would be your pleasure?
It's not change it
Nope.
one.
Not gonna change.
I make a motion to accept the audit.
Okay, thank you. Gary, is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there any further discussion? And we'll-
For following years, do you recommend for next year, for example, a similar, I know you said you had done some additional testing. Do you recommend that in the future?
I think I absolutely would for 23 and probably 24 through your software update. And what you, maybe not quite to the extent, because, we did some focused additional testing on some expense accounts, but I think I would take maybe a little bit of a different approach in terms of what the controls are within the QuickBooks and the QuickBooks Online, and there's been some improvements to that software as well. So I think there's some different tests I would do, and I think it could help provide some value to the board here and to the district in terms of, what kind of reports. One thing that I know Kelly was going to talk about and show you was the the voided transaction reports and things like that, things that could be of maybe a little bit more use, that the board can be an internal control and part of that. So using those and making sure that governance is reviewing those on a monthly basis, or maybe some of them are quarterly, however often. So I think I would take a little bit of a different approach, but I think obviously we can't, with the segregation of duties, we'll evaluate that with the new personnel and with the system, determine if we feel comfortable to remove that or not, and then we obviously still have to respond to that risk because we had it at the beginning of the year. And some of that change didn't happen until you still had Civic and Barb through August, so some of that's going to be a little bit of an overlap.
Well, and Civic was running the payroll in September. The city was running payroll for us.
Yeah.
So clearly we did cut over and run our first payroll off QuickBooks until October. So, the other thing is we do have to take care of, they spend a lot of time on the hardware stuff, so we have to get a handle on that.
Yeah, that, I mean, if they're not, in response to that piece in particular, if they're not willing to work with you and follow those, I think you go to, okay, then we're gonna go to a different process of if we're gonna order it, or if we're gonna have to get a check cut for the exact, you're gonna have to bill us, and we're gonna get a check cut on that by item transaction, or however you wanna do that, but you also don't wanna have a blank check given to them, or just have $500 on account, because that's not gonna solve your problem.
Right.
So, really making sure you understand that, or, hey, it's gonna become an inconvenience, unfortunately, to us, and then, maybe I don't wanna say a loss in business, but you have to balance that risk versus reward, cost benefit, and how much risk are you willing to tolerate? And that would be the determination.
So now, how is it working now? They just go down there and charge it?
Anybody can charge
But
it.
then they must send us a bill.
But it's not detailed.
But nobody's
and there's no
checking in
support.
the stuff that's been bought. So we don't really know where it goes.
And the receipts aren't all attached.
Yeah.
So, and some of that comes back to training too, if you have that policies and procedure manual, and how do you train internally to also help with that. But to get a handle on it, you also need assistance from the vendor to cooperate with, hey, these are our expectations, and if you're not gonna follow these expectations, okay, now I'm not willing to risk this, or maybe you are. That's an internal management and governance decision to evaluate that risk tolerance. But I can tell you, from an audit standpoint, those are red flags.
So you're saying now, they go down there and buy windshield washers, cleaner, and paper towels, and then we get a bill for that stuff, but they're not saying what they bought. That's what you're saying?
Can I?
Yep.
interject? Right now, what they do is, if they wanna go down and get something, they go down, they buy it, they come back, they hand me the receipt, because they print out a receipt. They hand me the receipt, I look it over, I make sure that what they said they were going down there for is what they got. And then that goes in a file, and then when I do run checks, I pay that, and then I verify that against the statement. So right now, we do have a little bit more of a checks and balances.
Yeah, right now there is.
It's better
Right.
than it was.
Yeah.
Right, but before, they would just go down, they were supposed to stick the invoices in the door, in the basket on the door. Sometimes, some people did, some people didn't.
And there was no limit on who could go.
Right, before it was just a free-for-all. Now, we're slowly taking it down to certain people, but they don't ask for who, like when I walk in and I go, I'm Heather and I want to charge this on the Ripon Area Fire District, they look up and I'm pretty much one of the only females that can charge, so it's kind of hard but anybody else that's a female can walk in there and go, I'm Heather. If they don't know who I am, and you give them somebody else's name, they can, and that's what they were doing before, is they would send somebody down and they'd say, well, so-and-so told me I could charge on this account, so then they would just put it underneath that person's name, and the clerks don't know that I'm not who I say I am.
And that doesn't just open you up to risk internally within your own organization, it opens you up to, if, say it's me, say I go down there and all of a sudden one night I'm out with my friends and I say something about, oh yeah, I just went down there and this, and all of a sudden the conversation goes this way. Now all of a sudden you could have outside people going in and saying, I'm with Ripon Area Fire District, charge it to this account. How would you know when there's no double check coming back to what actually came in? And when there's inconsistencies of the receipts coming back or not coming back. So it's not just an internal piece, it's now an outside risk, and that's really where it's what's my risk tolerance? How much do I want to deal with just to have the convenience of being able to walk over there?
But it's also not having one person open all the mail too. So you have to have a system of checks
Yeah.
and balances, who's opening those bills? right now Heather's opening those bills, and we can have, I'm in the office lots of times when she opens stuff. So you need to have a checks and balances in who's opening the mail too.
Yeah, but in Heather's case, if Heather can charge and Heather can open the mail, now the segregation of duties is still a problem, because, that's where unfortunately, the thinking through every piece, you think you have an answer here, but then all of a sudden you circle back here. So, and really that's for your own protection, so for that individual's protection, because if all of a sudden somebody comes back and says, well, that was Heather did that, and Heather opened the mail and Heather paid it, and Heather can make purchases, unless you're gonna go pull video footage, now you're in a he said, she said game. And that's not something personally that you want to be involved in. So that's where internal controls, a lot of people view internal controls as a scary thing, and it's really meant to be a protection for the individual person in that role, whether the person doing it or the person reviewing or approving it.
Does that answer your question?
Can I ask, this is really important to bring up, and, for all the reasons you brought up, has there been an issue with the place that you talked about? Has there been an issue?
There were a lot of exceptions in our testing with lack of documentation. We couldn't verify that all the items that the big purchases came back. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But with the documentation that's in place, you can't tell that. So I can't tell you if it's, I can't tell you what kind of issue it is, but I can tell you there's a documentation issue.
Where is that stated that we should know about? Where was that?
In which one?
Yeah, where?
The segregation of duties in that finding. That's really what that relates to.
Okay.
Is you have the same people and the lack of documentation. You have the same people doing one process. So one person can have full control over an entire transaction. Any additional questions on that? All good questions.
If not, we have a motion on the floor. Are you ready to vote? Do you want to discuss this anymore? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the 2022 audit, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you very much for all of your hard work on this.
No problem. If there's other questions, feel free to reach out. Heather and Ellen, I'll have our contact information. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or as you go through your your policies and procedures, things like that. I'd be happy to provide any assistance that you can, review them, and so forth. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Excellent. You too.
In the days of where you could zoom in, it's nice to have you in person.
Excellent. I love it too. It's a lot easier.
It's easier. It's easier in person.
You can read people too. It's do you have people's attention? Do you not, or do they have a question sometimes?
Thank you, safe travels.
Will do.
Tyler and Heather, you can come up and sit. All right, Chief's report.
First thing on the agenda here is department staffing morale. Still holding steady on all of those. Monthly calls for service, I do not have one in front of me. I believe they're coming out right now.
Thank you, Heather.
Can you say anything more about staffing morale update?
Status quo, still as it was before.
Thank you.
How many people did you get participating in Dickens, the parade and everything? Was it? All right.
I have it wrote down here.
Okay.
It's not on yours.
Oh, okay.
Don't push it. As you can see, some of these calls on here, the total for the month was 30, daytime 10. Rep response 0, mutual aid given 4, mutual aid received 1. Total calls for the year is 304. And just below that is the number of fire, stay on call 11, 1 apprentice.
And we're down for the year, from what I understand, for 2 reasons. Your education work for prevention is working, but we are not self-dispatching anymore.
No, we're not.
Do you all understand what self-dispatching is? Somebody hears a call and they dispatch themselves without being called by dispatch. And that's one of the reasons the call numbers are down. We're not self-dispatching.
Is that a normal procedure?
I don't believe it is. Typically you wait for dispatch to dispatch you,
No.
correct?
Yes, correct. A couple other things, we had, Dickens of a Christmas was Friday night. We had 4 of our engines up there, all decorated with lights. We spent 2 and a half hours down here decorating them. It was a good turnout. Saturday, we were up there as well with Dickens for the burn barrels, which I believe you were there. I saw you. A lot of compliments on the burn barrels. That was a fun event as well. We talked a while back here. Oh, go ahead.
It was good. It was good seeing those burn barrels. But as far as also the trucks, wasn't there also trucks sort of around the perimeter on Saturday nights? Was it? No?
We had our command vehicle down there.
Yeah.
That was just for safety reasons.
That's what I mean. That's yeah.
There was a plan put in place for safety down there through DPW and the police department as well. So roads were blocked off with DPW trucks. We had our command post blocking off one of the roads as well, and that was basically our command post. So if anything happened during that parade or Dickens, everything went through that command. And that's,
I think it's important to mention so that the community knows that there is coordination and that we are thinking about.
Chief Wallner had a big hand in that,
Yeah.
setting that all up, and we had paperwork here. We had paperwork in the command van that we had to follow. It was all laid out really nice for us.
I did have, somebody asked me a question, I was down there, they said, now if they get a fire call, they go out and hope those balloons blow off, or what happens then? You know what?
Oh, on Friday night?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, well, I don't know, I would guess they
We've had
probably
that
have somebody covering for us.
Otherwise we unplug them and they just deflate, and then we go along. We did have a call once when we were just finishing up with the parade, and we went to lights and stuff on them. We went to the call.
Well, at homecoming that one year, I think they just unloaded the kids and went,
Yep, that too. Yeah.
so,
Yep, we have an action plan in place, so.
yeah.
We talked a while back about the old ambulance that we had gotten donated. That was,
Oh, you were gonna sell
we
that?
did. We
You
sold
did?
it last week, Monday. Everything's sold, and we had some surplus equipment too that was in the back storage. We put all that on there as well. Just roughly $9,617 we got for that.
Okay.
So
Did we deposit that money yet?
the check has not come yet, I
Oh,
don't
okay.
believe, because as of yesterday, it was not here yet.
Okay.
As of
So-
today, it's not here yet.
I would think it should be coming in the mail shortly.
That's
So-
just for the truck?
We had a bunch of excess equipment and junk equipment, I guess, or one man's junk, another man's
Unusable
treasure.
equipment.
So we sold a bunch of stuff that was in the storage shed that we just didn't want to throw it away if somebody could use it. Old hose, somebody bought an old hose that didn't test out. So we put it on a pallet, somebody gave us $50 for the pallet, it's gone. So it's $50 more than we had.
How it cost what?
Well, they left the pallet, they wouldn't take the pallet. So also Monday, which was yesterday, we had our annual shop with the cop or shop with emergency personnel, which happens at Plaza Bowl. We go down there and we bowl with the kids with this event. And then following that event, I guess I'll call it some team bonding or team building. We all went over to the new boards and blades down here at the old Kmart store, and we all threw hatchets for an hour. And we all had a really good time. So,
Teach you how to cut doors down with your axes.
yes, yep. It took quite a while to carve out those boards, but yeah, we had a good time.
Apple on Gary's head.
I don't have anything else unless Heather has anything. and we can turn it over to Fire Inspector Granados.
Come on up.
You want me at the table? You want me standing or?
No, I want you at the table.
You can sit.
We're all friends here, Tyler.
All right, so good evening. My name's Tyler Granados. I'm a firefighter for Ripon and also the lead fire inspector here now. And so my goal for tonight is just kind of to explain some of the roles and responsibilities affiliated with inspecting, and just kind of talk about the inspections as a whole. And I know that you guys have kind of talked about inspections a little bit, but I wasn't sure about how in detail you went. So just a little bit of a background about me. I've been on the department for around 5 years-ish. I started as a cadet and then kind of worked my way through the ranks to becoming the lead inspector. So I went to school. I have a 2-year associate's degree through Fox Valley. So some of the basics here. So I believe inspections are one of the most important aspects of our department because I think they can have the biggest impact on the community. I think of inspections as public education. Every single time I go out is public education. And almost all my time spent at the station is spent on some form of inspection. So I kind of wanted to go in and talk about the process of how an inspection works, just so you guys, I don't know how aware of like the process of inspecting. So the beginning of the process starts with identifying a property to inspect. Each property is either inspected once a year or twice a year. And then you also have to think about properties are open seasonally, or some have interesting business hours. For example, like the movie theater, you know, it's not going to be open during the day. So we choose the property that we're going to want to inspect, and then we go ahead and decide if we're going to have to schedule with the business, or if we can do what we call a walk-in, which is just during normal business hours. We go and request to do an inspection. Definitely one of the hardest parts of inspecting is the scheduling period, just because businesses have very limited time for fire inspections, and my time is very limited. There's a lot of coordination that has to happen between the owners, the employees, plus coordinating maintenance personnel to come on scene with us is quite the struggle. So once we gain permission, yep, go ahead.
I have a question about gaining
Sure.
permission.
Yeah.
And I love that you just said you view this as education. So I mean, I hope that our local business community sees you as, you know, this is important, this is how they learn and can keep everyone safe. What is a business's role or ability, like let's just say it's a super busy time for them. Can they say, nope, sorry, come back in the future?
Yep.
Or is it your right to say, no, I have to, it's my right to come in now?
So
What is that?
Yeah, so I'm a nice guy, so like I am generally willing to come back. Yeah, they have full permission to say like, oh, this is a busy time. I am required to do a fire inspection of the property, so yes, eventually I do like have to, like if I needed to take the measures to get into the building, I could. But generally I'm pretty lenient with, and it happens all the time. They say, hey, this is a really busy time, and I just say, you know, I either schedule a time or I say I can come back at a different time.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's how that works. So yeah, gaining permission. Once I've gained permission, like I said, I schedule or do a walk-in, and then after that, I go and do a thorough inspection of the building. And by this, I mean any walkable area of the building is somewhere that I need to inspect. So this hallways, closets, electrical rooms, furnace rooms, sprinkler rooms, you name it, I go and inspect it. And that's why there's a lot of coordinating with employees and maintenance personnel, because they have the keys to get into those places. The inspection times has everything to do with the building size, as you can imagine. Like a building like Alliance Laundry is going to take a lot longer than a building like a small business downtown. So, and it also has to do with the amount of like infractions or safety aspects that we're trying to fix with the business. I'll have to end up going back additional times just to make sure that they're doing everything safely. So once I've completed the inspection, I've done a thorough walkthrough, I go and do, I don't know, what I call a face-to-face, preferably with the business owner, just because we can resolve the issue faster. But normally it's with like an employee, and they have to pass that information on. We do have a system in place with an iPad to write everything down, get contact information, and then they get an email with some of the infractions that they have.
And is he putting it into the state system right away, or do you?
When he puts it into ESO,
Yeah.
it goes into ESO, and then every once a month, ESO sends it to the state.
Okay, so what's happening is when you're doing this on your new iPad, which the board approved, it's going into the state right away. It's not delayed. We're not delaying how
No.
we're reporting.
Right, yeah, because it gets uploaded once a month, and so every month, anything we put into ESO gets uploaded to the state.
And you do these you have to do everybody twice a year, right?
It just depends on the business.
Okay.
Yeah, not everyone gets it twice a
Yeah, not
year.
everybody.
There's certain parameters that they don't have to have it done a second time.
So, but this is gonna help us with our state audit, because there's no delay
Correct,
on you submitting the information.
Mhm.
correct.
What is a general decision as to if it's once a year or twice a year?
It has to do with, she helps me out with that, but it has to do with like how busy the business is, right?
That,
And then square.
the square footage, it depends, like with the hotels, it goes on how many stories they are, if they're fully sprinklered already, if, depending on how many units are in.
The amount of
underneath the
apartments in
roof.
a building
Yeah.
matters.
So there's a whole thing that we go by that are NFPA rules that we decide how they fit into that parameter. And then if they don't fit into the parameters that the NFPA has put into effect, then we do them a second time. Then they have to be done a second time if they're not exempt.
Yep. So that's generally how inspection goes. There's a lot of hiccups and hoops we have to jump through. So what I hope for is when I schedule the inspection, or if I do a walk-in, I want to be completed with it within like the hour generally. But inspections can take, from a couple weeks to a couple months to be done with. Like if you take like Alliance Laundry or even Ripon College, there's a lot of buildings to Ripon College, and each inspection is done separately, but it takes a while to get the totality of it done. I inspect around 450 businesses. I'm not sure on the exact number, but and that includes the city of Ripon, town of Ripon, and town of Nipiescom. Let's see. So aside from just those general inspections, me personally am tasked with going to like new construction, under construction buildings. The best example I have for you is Ripon College is updating Far Hall. And so for the past couple weeks, I've been going in frequently to, I guess, look at and make sure that they're constructing the building properly, and also that they have the right parameters and safety factors for when that building is under construction, making sure they have that fire protection in place during that time of construction. I also do sprinkler testing, and that's very common. My best example for you is the old Royal Ridges, which is now the community church. When they updated the building, they were required to put a sprinkler system in, and so this past month I probably went there like 6 times, either for sprinkler testing or for final inspections of the building. So
I think we just did that at Sweet Queen too. They just put in
yep.
system
Oh yeah,
there too, and
that's a good example
we
too.
were up there as well.
So it's a pretty involved process with like under construction buildings, because they move so quickly, and somebody has to go in and verify that it was done right, and so that falls on me. But
What about the new Knuth Brewery building?
yep, so I'm in contact with them too. So I go in and yep, they have a sprinkler system going in, and then there's some other things going on too. And then during that time, it's just also being familiar with what the building is looking like. And because I'm the one who's going to be doing the inspections in the future, so I want to be familiar with the layout and where things are. And I, as the authority having jurisdiction, we have a say on where things get put. Like the FDC, that's our option of where we want to have it. It's just wherever it's accessible. So, if I ever have a question, I'll come to them and to verify where things should be put as well. So. We have one other inspector on the department. He has very limited hours. It's around once a week, I'd say. He's very good at what he does, and he does a really good job with inspections, it's just very limited time. So I believe, well, anybody can take the inspector course, so we have a lot of upcoming students coming in, and they might have the inspector course, or they are taking it, and so anybody can take that and could come in and be an inspector for Ripon. I believe it takes someone who knows the community well and can communicate well with people, and also has the integrity to do a good job. That means going into the buildings and actually checking everything and caring about what they're looking at. So I guess one of my biggest concerns for this upcoming inspection period, and why I wanted to come in today and not later, is I kind of looked at like how many inspections we need to be doing a day, and I guess it came down to like maybe 5, just based on building size, and there's a lot of factors in how long they take. But say 5 inspections, and between, his name is Connor, me and Connor, we are maybe on 2 to 3 times a week. That means 10 inspections are getting left to the end. So that means automatically within the first month or first week, we're falling behind on inspections. I also care about like the quality of my shifts as well. So in this past year, when I was on shift, my shift was fully consumed with inspections. I was doing 20 inspections a day, which is a lot when you want to do them in quality. So important aspects of how a fire department runs, such as training and station cleaning, was kind of being swept under the table because this was like a #1 thing. Another concern I had is loss of good communication. So I gave out my personal phone number to all the businesses, just because I want them to always have someone available to talk to, such as the construction companies. As they move fast, they need to call somebody in. So I believe the fire inspector needs to be available at all times, and at this point I am, but like even on my off days, these are days that I'm coming in to do inspections, just because these things move so quickly. So like I said before, I think inspections are one of the biggest aspects of this department, and I think these issues should be addressed now before we start the inspection period. By the way, I try to start inspections like January, February, and then obviously the inspection period goes till November, and we use that whole entire time. So.
And yeah, the inspections have to be done. I've given them a drop dead due date of November 1st so that the city can get and the towns can get that on their tax bills for the businesses. They were coming in late in previous years, and the city was very concerned about charging businesses for inspections that had not been completed. So Tyler has done a really good job of completing everything in a timely manner. By the way, I do hear a lot of good things from the business community about how inspections are being done, and you are personable, and they appreciate learning about this, and they appreciate being told exactly what it is they need to do to fix the problems, and then you do follow up on that, right?
Yeah, I try to follow up.
In the past, that's the complaints I was getting from people getting inspected. You can't put that over there, but they wouldn't tell them where they could put it.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah, like I said, it's, I'm not gonna like tell them to do something and not explain why. There's always a reason on why we're doing these things, so it's just a learning experience. I'm learning, and as well as them, So we just always try to work with them. I'm not gonna like scold them for having something wrong.
And they appreciate that.
Yeah.
your job should be to teach them.
Right, yep, that's what it is. That's why, it's just a big public education event, so. Yeah, I care about the quality of inspections and the safety of Ripon, so if you have any questions.
And that cuts down on fire calls.
Yeah. I mean, overall, yeah, it's just safety of the city, so.
Yeah, but then we miss our $500 fire call.
Yeah, that's true. It's a revenue gap.
So, is there any questions?
Tyler, thanks for that overview. That's helpful for
Yeah, no
me
problem.
specifically. The iPad that you talked about, I believe, is the iPad capable because you might be in places where you don't have access to Wi-Fi. So aren't we paying for cellular data so that you can upload it at any time? So doesn't that mean that could act as a phone? if cellular data is going to that, I'm getting at, I hear you saying you're giving out your personal cell phone, which I admire, and thank you. I think the people in the city probably appreciate that, but that also begs the question, you know, we were just talking about our policies and procedures, and so if you're comfortable to do that, but if you were to leave, or your phone number, I don't know, gets hijacked, something like that, shouldn't we have an ability that we have a department cell phone number that we're giving out, and would that iPad have the capability of that?
I think that that's a bigger issue. One of the things that's bothered me about this, the fire district, is people call here to report a fire. They don't call, sometimes this happens. I've been in the office when it happens. Oh, we need the fire department. Well, Heather's like, well, you need to hang up and call the dispatch center. Every other fire department, every other law enforcement department in the county, when they call that administrative number, it goes to dispatch. We have an issue with our phone system. So adding yet another piece to it could complicate that. It's a good idea, and I don't know if you guys take those iPads home with you or if they're left here. I don't know what our policy is on that.
It's just always been that they leave them here.
Yeah.
They never get taken, they always stay in my office.
Typically, they stay, that piece of equipment stays here. So again, I think we have to look at our policies and procedures. There are some other policies and procedures we need to look at with regard to inspections, because I think if somebody fails and you give them a list of things to do, and you go back in however many days you tell them, and if they haven't done it, we have no recourse. We don't have anything, I believe, to give any bite to them not being in compliance.
Well, don't say it on public record right now.
But that's another thing we need to look at.
Yeah, yes and no. I think the state overall has a policy that with the NFPA code that says if they don't comply within so many days, UB can take this action. So the NFPA puts us into
Okay.
that.
But that needs to be clear on our end, and then what is it? And can he just hand somebody a piece of paper if they're not in compliance? And have them understand that there are consequences.
Right.
So there are a whole lot of issues, Jolene, surrounding this. But good thoughts.
Well, I mean, thank you for doing that. I also feel like that does put you in a little bit of a tough situation.
All right, yeah. Yeah, and with the phone thing, it's more about like, I don't know how well the communication would be between, you know, if they're calling the station instead of calling me, because I'm generally the only person who's like allowed to inspect, who's, you know, state certified to go out and do these things. And so I think there would just be a huge loss in communication between the businesses and the inspector, which is a big issue in my mind.
I think the other thing is, they call, they've met him, they know him, they call him and say, we're having a little trouble with this, what do you think? You're familiar and they're familiar with, I mean, I think it would go a lot faster than going through Heather and then going to John and John saying, go out and check this guy. I mean,
Yeah, and in this,
people like to get things
Yeah.
done.
with somebody they know.
For example.
And right away.
Yeah, for example, like I said, there's a big construction with fire hall at Ripon College, and like she was unaware of this, but Ripon College has my contact information, and then when they contact me to come there, I just went directly there, so.
And we have a strategic plan, which will be on our January agenda, and there was a piece in there about having, changing the structure of the inspector. And so we need to look at what they present to us in January for recommendations on maybe we need a full-time inspector. We've already cut the budget to have a half-time chief. I don't know, those are things that we're gonna have to discuss. So I think, you know, our heavy lifting isn't over yet.
Yeah.
We have heavy
So,
lifting yet to do.
Yeah, as of right now, the staffing we have and the amount of hours that we're allowed to work is not sufficient to get the amount of inspections we have done. So like right off the bat, we're gonna be falling behind. So that's just kind of I wanted to bring it up now. And so we could maybe figure out something for February.
So now we as a board, what's our plan to tackle that?
We're gonna look at the strategic plan, and we can build it into the strategic plan.
Yeah. But,
And we get more state and certified inspectors.
yeah,
Yep.
I'll be willing to go. I don't have mine, but I'll be willing to go get it.
I mean, there are solutions for it, but I don't want to cherry pick solutions. I want us to look at that strategic plan, look at our 5-year capital improvement plan, and so we know where we're going and what it is we need to do. And so I think Tyler's presentation was very much on point because there is reference to inspections in that strategic plan. And we have to decide what we want to do with it.
sounds like you wish you could do this more. You could get more hours, but unfortunately you can't.
Yeah.
But there's always a
Basically.
way to, when I was an administrator, there's always a way to structure things. I always believe there's enough money in government. It's how you allocate the money. Right, Jim?
I think that's right, and this is one of the revenue areas too,
Mhm.
which is gonna be part of your strategic analysis, because how are you charging enough? Are you charging the right?
Mhm.
On another report that's coming up later in terms of improvements you've made since over just the last year, and this is one of them. Listening to
Yeah.
that, and it's definitely on that list for later, as to where you were and where you are, come a long way. A lot of really good improvements by your folks here, and this is one of the areas with more to do. With the concerns was helpful to hear too, because that'll help steer you right into decisions you gotta make from a budget standpoint, a revenue standpoint, strategic planning. It's perfect. It's falling into line. It's what you worked on starting a year ago, maybe over a year ago, with some tough meetings. But it's much better. And thanks.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, we have old business. We talked about the accounting transition. Did you have anything more you wanted to add to that?
No, pretty much, I'm just, or Amanda sent me an email, but it didn't come through, so I'm emailing back into her asking for the members from Civics again.
We have a brief IT security update. All the computers are secure now. There was no security on any computer in this building. So everything is secure now. And we're going to keep the Google accounts for the fire district. So the Microsoft account or the Outlook accounts are maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so that's a minimal cost. So we're working on that. We are working on, did we ever get the domain name for?
Yes, he got,
Okay.
yep, that's all been taken care
We
of.
got, sometimes these things take months, but we finally have the domain name for,
He had the access, he just
Didn't
didn't
get it?
use the right, yeah, he just.
okay, for the web page. So the web page is now ours. But a lot of things were farmed out to people who were not in the fire department. And we're trying to collect like all the social media, get it back and get it under our roof. And I think we're there now. And the computers are all secure. We didn't even have virus control on some of the computers. So that's all been taken care of now. They will also help us when it's time to write a grant for a new computer system. They will help us with that.
So what's the new domain, or is it a new
No,
website
it's the same domain and everything. It's just that it was through one company and we had to get it transferred over to the new company.
Oh, okay.
And so,
But a lot of things were scattered. There was no, it was scattered. So it's like we had to go back and put everything back in our basket, so we had access to everything. And now we can control our own brand too with social media, which we couldn't do before, but now we can. So are there any questions about IT security? New business, did you all get a copy?
no.
Okay, Heather's gonna hand this out, and Jim is here because he's been working with Heather and I on this. You're going to get a copy of what is going to be a report card to the communities, which we would like to send out to media next week. So what I'd like you to do is look it over and see if we've missed anything, or if you have questions about it, if we've missed anything that we've been able to accomplish this year.
The other thing I'm going to add to it, it's stated in a way positively, because you really need to, all of you, the board, the firefighters, the people, others working within the department, take a lot of credit for all the work you're putting into really making advances and making sure things are in place. This is not to be critical of anybody or to look backwards, it's to look forward. And there's a lot of positive stuff going on in your department. You've had a good department, you've had a good reputation, you've got a stronger one that's getting better and better, and this is a nice list to say, here's stuff people have been working on. And it's not to be negative, it's really not, okay? So as you look at each one of these, for example, as you talk about social media, and if you had a Ripon Fire District page, who could post to that? Who controlled that? How did you get into it to change it? We didn't always have the best handle on that, so we centralized and upgraded. If you talk about inspections, and we go back over a year and we talked about complaints that you were getting as board members from people in the community, were we charging the right amount? Were we actually doing the inspections or billing ahead of time on it? I'm not being critical of it, it's just putting in place a better scenario that you heard tonight to say, here's where we're doing it, we're timely, we're billing it timely, we're getting nice compliments. Probably saving a lot of issues in terms of making sure the stuff is in place to avoid good preventative measures, to avoid problems. That's all really positive stuff. Was it bad before? That's not to say it was bad, it's just so much better now and getting up to speed. When you look into the training aspect, you know, were we fully certified? Were we doing all the right training that we should do? We're okay, but now we have the people in place, the training aspects in place, the other aspects. So everything on this list is to say, here's the improvements lots of people, you included, have been working on. Tonight you heard about audit pieces, and do we get the right things? And it's not to say anybody did anything wrong or does anything wrong. It's how do you put it in place so you can feel really good about every dollar coming in here is where it's supposed to be accounted for and going in the right spot, without anybody being uncomfortable. As I would never want to be the only person that approves all of the stuff. Not that I do anything wrong, but why? You have a good confidence that everything is moving forward appropriately without question. Again, not to say negative on any of this stuff. It's all, every one of these is stated positively in terms of moving forward in the direction you're going, and you're going in a really good direction from where we all were with some pretty hot meetings in the past with some tensions to building it forward. That's the message I see with it overall. And feel good about it, quite frankly. And not that I did, but it's something you all did and your staff's been really working on. I just kept track of some of the list of the stuff as you were going through it, going, this is good. And there may be more, so that's why you got it.
Yeah,
There's other stuff.
yes, Julie?
Where, they said this is called report card of the community. So where will this be available? Where?
We will issue it to the media. It will be issued to the paper and radio stations. That's where it's going to go. The community wants to know, I'm sure you all get feedback from the community asking where we're at. Well, this is going to help them understand where we're at and what we have done in the last year.
Then I think if we're going to do that, then I think that it would be helpful for us to put a year, or not a year, a date.
These are just what we've done. He's going to put it into a document for us with explaining the context and everything.
Got it. Because if this is going to be given to the paper.
It's not going to be given to the paper like this. This is for your information so that you can add things to it or tell us maybe we didn't do something we thought we did. This is just the list. He will do
I gotta add a little bit more to what I sort of said to you tonight that goes into the document. Explain,
Yeah.
why is this, what's going on with
Yeah.
it, why are you reporting on it? I think you ought to take some credit on all the good work that's being done and the strength of your department. And quite frankly, it was even some of the suggestion coming through your accounting firm to say, well, there's a lot going on here and you might want to do a report to your community about the strength of your department. That's more to it. I got work to do on that piece though, kind of to fill in what I talked to you about.
So if you have suggestions, you can either email Heather or I, because we've been sharing the document, actually, we've been working on this document for about a year. May, okay. Because Jim suggested that we keep track of our progress, and it was a good suggestion.
There just got to be a lot of things you're working on. This is good stuff, seriously. So anyway.
So this is wonderful. And now just to clarify, so if we're gonna, so we will be getting a report card to the community that will be going out. So for example, it says all buildings are being inspected. When it goes to the community, it probably should say all buildings in the town of Ripon, in the city of Ripon, and town of Nebraska, right?
Good point.
Yeah.
When it
That's the
says,
kind of feedback we're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's exactly, as you look at these.
They're all in the fire district, so
or
But
within-
not everybody might understand the fire
Right,
district
right.
either.
then they can investigate.
Well, yeah.
And they can by listening to how we word this document.
What's that?
They can investigate how the document will be worded that will provide them that context that they need. That the fire district is town of Ripon, city of Ripon, part of the town of Nebraska.
Yeah, but you had a really good point,
Right.
Jolene, because we just keep adding to it, and it's like, you can see, these are bullet points. So,
Yeah.
lots of times it's on the fly.
Shoot some emails as you see them.
Yeah.
Over as you see them.
and I will follow up. My next, if I could just say it here, is where it says we stand at 35 employees at this time. That's where I think a date would be helpful. And then maybe, do we want to say, do you want to break up employees by, or no? Okay.
We might get a little context of where you were like over the last couple of years. It's up to you guys as to where you are. But, people wonder, are we shrinking? Are people upset? Are people leaving? No. I mean, your report is really strong.
We've been very fortunate that this department has held together. Very fortunate. We can see new leaders rising, and it's a good thing, because you want succession planning.
Is that listed on here?
No,
That's an idea. I guess that'd be maybe under training, that there's a path, if I don't know, I don't want to speak for the department.
well, that could also be under personnel management.
Is there a system in place where, did we say that one of the things we wanted to make sure that current firefighters department has a clear communication plan to communicate to, the chain of command is,
I'm not, Cody? Okay.
Say yes.
So
They
we
know the
can-
rank and file right now. They know how to get a hold of any one of us. Yeah.
I guess to that point is that we can't, without getting feedback, which maybe is a good point, year end, do we get feedback from the department? As what they see are some things to maybe add?
Yeah, what's going on?
What was that truck that broke down? We had that fixed.
Engine
14.
Engine 14, that should go on the report card, because we just replaced batteries, but we fixed that truck too after it broke down.
Well, it's on the report as all vehicles are DOT certified.
Okay.
I'm not sure we want to start pulling
Right,
separate vehicles out.
that specific stuff, okay.
And again, we're trying to be positive, not to suggest we were running with vehicles that weren't certified.
Right.
Problematic. So we're really, there's a way all of this is stated in some sense to keep it
Yep.
Clean.
plain
Yeah.
and positive. Like you say, you know, a good training program, we don't want to, nobody was trained. You know, we had all these liabilities, no. And that's not the case. But just let us know.
Yep, just send either Heather or I an email, we'll add it to, you've made notes, I've made a couple notes, I can add them to.
Or just send us a note, we'll get it
Yep.
done and get another draft out.
We would like to get it out this month, so the timeline on it would be, I would say by the end of the week. Email us. Does that work for you, Heather?
It's a good list. It's neat. That's good.
So, thank you, Jim. So for future agenda items, I believe the strategic plan that you all wanted Robert to submit that in January, and that meeting is January 2nd. And then we need to begin working on our policies and procedures in tandem with the bylaws, because in some places they contradict one another. They need to be updated, and then also include a lot of the things that Amber was recommending. And Doug, you said you would work on that? And I actually like to do bylaws. I'm one of those geeky people. I wrote them for Lakeland Fire District. So we can work on that. I don't know if we'll have a draft by January 2nd, perhaps.
I guess I better get working on it.
I guess. Are there any other things? There was something in the minutes that I didn't understand about
Foundation money.
yeah, I didn't understand the
I
foundation
went back and
money
looked,
thing.
listened to it, and I thought that's what I heard Jonathan say at the last meeting.
It was to,
Wasn't,
so we accepted it last time, but then we were gonna talk about if we wanted to earmark it for something
right.
specific.
Oh, that's not foundation money, that's the,
The donation money.
yeah, donation money,
Okay, well, I
not
just-
foundation money. Okay.
But why don't we point to what we're talking about specifically? If that was a concern from the minutes you said.
It was on the November 7th
Yeah.
minutes,
Where the possible
the
things
agenda
for
for next
Oh,
meeting,
right here.
so it's donation.
Donation.
Thank you.
Well, should that be then an update?
Well, no, foundation was right, because it came from like her name.
It was
Foundation.
stock, it was all stock.
Oh, but I thought it was her name as a foundation.
I can look again, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna say donation,
Yeah,
so I
donation
know what
money's
it
fine.
is. And then I think we should be able to show what money is restricted based upon where we got it. Like, we do have money that's restricted that maybe hasn't been spent this year. Like, has the firehouse money been spent?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Maybe about the extrication equipment.
Yeah, so we can do maybe a report on that, so you have a good accounting. And you saw there's 32,000 in the equipment fund that you're always very concerned about. But then the other thing in policies and procedures that I think we need to look at is, and I don't know if we have this, Barry, you'll have to let me know. Do we have a specific percentage amount that should be restricted? Like, some organizations in government have 20% that's restricted in the money market account, and you don't go below that.
Are you talking about a fund balance?
Yeah,
Fund balance policy, I don't think we have one here in this
I
district.
don't know that we do.
okay. So maybe we talk about a fund balance policy too.
But I'd sure like to get back to run over money. If we have extra money, it's supposed to go into, the capital.
Yeah,
And
Yep.
we haven't done that for years.
it looks like in
I
20.
think that's where all that 300,000 comes from.
I don't know. I think we need to get a handle on that. That's why we need, you're right, we need to look at what's restricted, like even from the Orville's, Brivogel, his account, there's $57,000 in there from that too. So we might want to talk about in general where these unrestricted gifts go and what you want to earmark them for. And maybe it's equipment. And equipment can be trucks, it can be radios,
The way
it
the
can be whatever
bylaws
you
are,
want.
if it's equipment, it's capital, all we have to do is have a unanimous vote and they can go for that.
Okay,
That paid for the rapid response vehicle, didn't it? That came out.
Yeah, I believe that rapid response money came out of capital improvement fund, 2017, 2018?
Whenever it was, I don't
It's a
remember.
2017
You
vehicle.
get my age,
Yeah.
time goes a lot faster.
Yeah, we voted to pull that money out and fund the rapid response truck, which worked really well for a lot of years.
okay. But those are some of the things we're gonna need to talk about, so, we will begin doing that in the new year. Our next regular meeting
Can I
is.
ask a question?
Sure.
Regarding, getting unrestricted money is the most desirable, obviously, for any organization.
Well, yeah.
So we're talking about possibly restricting it.
No.
Is that what I just heard?
No. I'm talking about the money we have that's already restricted. I'm not talking about unrestricted money. We have money that is restricted, that was given to us and restricted for certain things.
Okay.
So we need an accounting of that.
Sure.
And then we need to look at what we have in the mutual fund to see what our balance is of unrestricted.
Oh, got it. That's not what I heard, but, okay.
Okay. But now you get what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Okay. All right, January 2nd, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Second.
Thank you, Tom. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, have a happy holiday season and Merry Christmas.